Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. I've never believed in fate, until I saw what those termites built in the walls of my grandmother's house in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Picture this. You're lying in bed right now, comfortable, safe. Maybe you're about to drift off to sleep. But before you do, let me ask you something. What if the things that destroy our homes started creating something else entirely? What if I told you that somewhere in the heartland of America, termites stopped eating wood and started building with it? If that sounds impossible, stick around, because what I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you thought you knew about the natural world. And maybe, just maybe, it'll make you listen a little more carefully to the sounds in your own walls tonight. The story begins now. My name is Sarah Chen, and 3 weeks ago, I inherited my grandmother's Victorian house in Cedar Falls. Population 58,000. The kind of place where everyone knows your business before you do. Grandma Rose had lived there for 60 years. Alone for the last 20 after Grandpa died. The house sat on Maple Street, you know the type. White picket fence, wraparound porch. The American dream wrapped in peeling paint and memories. I'd spent summers there as a kid, climbing the old oak tree, catching fireflies in mason jars. But that was before. The first thing I noticed when I arrived wasn't the overgrown lawn or the sagging gutters. It was the silence. Cedar Falls in October should sound like, well, falling leaves, kids playing, dogs barking. But Grandma's house sat in a pocket of quiet so thick you could choke on it. I remember standing on that porch, keys heavy in my hand, thinking about turning around, getting back in my Honda Civic and driving the 4 hours back to Chicago. My apartment there was small, cramped, but it was mine. This house felt like it was waiting for something. The lock turned easier than it should have. Inside, that familiar smell of lavender and old wood hit me like a physical thing. But underneath it, something else, sweet, almost like honey, but wrong somehow, like honey left too long in the sun. Hello? My voice cracked. Stupid. The house had been empty for 2 weeks since Grandma died. Who was I expecting to answer? I dropped my bags in the foyer and walked through the rooms. Everything exactly as I remembered. Frozen in time. Grandma's knitting still sat by her chair. A half-finished crossword puzzle on the kitchen table. October 3rd. 2 weeks ago exactly. That's when I heard it. A sound like rice being poured into a bowl. Soft, rhythmic, coming from inside the walls. Now, I grew up in the Midwest. I know house sounds, settling wood, pipes expanding. This wasn't that. This was deliberate, purposeful. I pressed my ear against the dining room wall. The sound stopped immediately, like whatever was making it knew I was listening. Mice, I said out loud. Had to be mice. Old house. Made sense. But mice don't build things, and mice don't whisper. That first night, I barely slept. Every creak sent my heart racing. Every shadow looked like something moving. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and made coffee in Grandma's ancient percolator. That's when I found her journal. It was tucked behind the flour canister, leather-bound and worn. The first entry was dated 6 months ago. Grandma's careful cursive filled the pages. April 15th, they've started building again. I can hear them at night. Tiny architects, tiny prayers. My hands shook as I flipped through. May 2nd, found another one in the basement wall. Perfect, absolutely perfect. Like St. Peter's in miniature. How do they know? How do they know what churches look like? June 10th, Pastor Williams doesn't believe me. says I need to rest, but I've seen them, carrying their little pieces, building their cathedrals, building their sanctuaries. The entries got stranger. August 5th, they sang last night. I swear they sang. Hundreds of tiny voices in the walls. Latin. They were singing in Latin. September 14th, I understand now. They're not destroying, they're creating, they're preparing. But for what? The last entry was dated October 2nd, the day before she died. Sarah will come. Sarah will see. Sarah will understand. The churches are almost complete, almost time. I'm so tired, but I'll wait. I'll wait for her to see. My coffee went cold as I sat there, reading and rereading that last entry. Grandma had been sick. I knew that. The cancer had spread to her brain. Hallucinations were common, that's what the doctors said. But what if? No, I pushed the journal away. Grandma was sick. Confused, that was all. Then I heard it again. The rice pouring sound. But this time, from everywhere. All the walls, all at once. I grabbed a flashlight and went to the basement. The basement stairs creaked with every step. That sweet honey smell got stronger as I descended. At the bottom, I swept my flashlight across the space. Boxes, old furniture, the usual basement things. Then the beam caught something that shouldn't exist. In the wall, where the foundation met the wood, was a hole about the size of my fist. But it wasn't the hole that made me stop breathing. It was what was inside it. A perfect miniature cathedral. I'm not talking about some rough approximation. This was architectural genius shrunk down to 3 inches tall. Flying buttresses no thicker than toothpicks. Rose windows made from something translucent and amber. Tiny towers reaching up into the darkness of the wall cavity. I knelt down, flashlight trembling, and looked closer. The detail was impossible. Gargoyles the size of rice grains. Doors that looked like they could open. And the material. It wasn't wood, it was something else. Something that caught the light like pearl but felt organic when I touched it with my fingertip. That's when I saw them. Termites, but not normal termites. These were pale gold, almost luminescent, and they moved with purpose, with coordination, carrying impossibly small pieces of that pearl-like material, adding to their creation piece by microscopic piece. One of them stopped, turned toward me, and I swear it looked right at me, not the blind fumbling of an insect. It saw me. I scrambled backward, heart hammering, and my flashlight beam swept across the basement walls. Holes, dozens of holes, each one containing another impossible structure. Cathedrals, chapels, basilicas, an entire hidden city of sacred architecture built by insects that shouldn't exist. The rice pouring sound grew louder. They were all moving now, all building, all creating. I ran up the stairs and slammed the door behind me. Stood there panting in Grandma's kitchen, while my rational mind tried to process what couldn't be real. Termites don't build churches. Termites don't build churches. But they did. And worse, I was starting to understand why. I didn't call an exterminator, how could I? Hello, I need someone to come look at the termite churches in my walls. They'd think I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I made Grandma's recipe for cinnamon rolls. The smell filled the kitchen, familiar and comforting. Normal. I needed normal. But even as I kneaded the dough, I could hear them. Building. Always building. My phone buzzed. Mom calling from Phoenix. I almost didn't answer. Sarah, honey, how's the house? Are you settling in okay? I stared at the basement door. Yeah, Mom, it's fine. I know it must be hard being there without her, but she wanted you to have it. She was very specific about that. Mom, I hesitated. Did Grandma ever mention anything strange about the house? A pause. Too long. Strange house, sweetie? Just, I don't know. Noises in the walls? Another pause. When Mom spoke again, her voice was carefully casual. Old houses make noises, Sarah. You know that. But there was something else there, something underneath the reassurance. Mom, did you grow up with them too? The noises? The line went quiet. Then, I have to go, honey. But Sarah, whatever you do, don't break open the walls. Promise me. She hung up before I could ask why. The cinnamon rolls burned while I sat there, processing. Mom knew. She'd grown up here. She'd heard them too. And she'd left. Moved to Phoenix the day after her 18th birthday and never came back. Smart woman, but I wasn't smart. I was curious. And curiosity, well, you know what they say about curiosity. Instead, I did what any millennial would do. I Googled it. Nothing. No termite church phenomenon. No architectural insects. No reported cases of bugs building basilicas. According to the internet, what I'd seen was impossible, but I had to know more. I drove to the Cedar Falls Public Library, the old Carnegie building on 3rd Street. Mrs. Hofstede had been the librarian there since before I was born. If anyone knew the history of Maple Street, it would be her. The library smelled like old paper and lemon polish. Mrs. Hofstede looked up from her desk, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Sarah Chen, I heard you were back. Small towns, news travels fast. Mrs. Hofstede, I'm looking for information about my grandmother's house. Maybe construction records, history? She studied me for a long moment. Then, follow me. She led me past the main stacks, through a door marked Staff Only, down to the archives. Dust motes danced in the fluorescent light. Your grandmother was a good woman, Mrs. Hofstede said, pulling out a banker's box. But that house, that whole street, it's got history. She handed me a folder. Inside, newspaper clippings. The oldest was from 1897. Mysterious illness strikes Maple Street. 7 families report strange behaviors. 1913. Local entomologist claims discovery of new termite species. Colleagues skeptical. 1928. Maple Street resident found dead. Walls of home discovered to contain unusual formations. 1941. Federal agents investigate Maple Street. Residents tight-lipped. 1967. University of Iowa scientists study architectural anomalies in Cedar Falls homes. And then, nothing. Like everyone had agreed to stop talking about it. Mrs. Hofstede, what happened on Maple Street? She glanced at the door, lowered her voice. You know, I've lived here all my life. My mother worked in this library, her mother before her. We keep the records, we know the stories. She pulled out another box. This one was locked. The key came from a chain around her neck. This doesn't leave the building, she said. Inside, photographs. Old, black and white. But what they showed was unmistakable. Walls torn open. Structures inside that shouldn't exist. And in one, a blurry figure of a man, his face twisted in terror, golden insects pouring from his mouth. Dr. Martin Ashford, Mrs. Hofstede said. 1913. He discovered them, studied them, thought he could control them. She showed me another photo, a woman standing in front of my grandmother's house. She looked familiar. My great-grandmother, Mrs. Hofstede confirmed. She was Dr. Ashford's assistant. She wrote about what they found. A leather journal, pages brittle with age. I read with growing horror. The specimens demonstrate unprecedented collective intelligence. They respond to human presence. More disturbing, they seem to anticipate human needs. building structures that reflect our deepest psychological impulses toward the sacred. Dr. Ashford believes they are not of earthly origin. He speaks of passengers that came with the meteor shower of 1876. Nonsense, of course. But the termites, they do not behave as insects should. The constructions grow more elaborate, more beautiful, more terrible. We found one today that contained, I cannot write it. Dr. Ashford has forbidden me from documenting what we saw inside the largest cathedral. They're in him now. I can see them moving beneath his skin. He says they're showing him the truth, the purpose. He speaks of a grand convergence, an awakening. I fear we have meddled with something beyond our comprehension. The final entry was just one line. They sing to me at night. I think I'm beginning to understand the words. Mrs. Hofstede closed the journal. 6 months later, she disappeared. So did Dr. Ashford. So did everyone who got too close to the truth. But the houses, people still live there. New people, always new people. The old families, they learn to leave, or they learn to listen, to become part of it. Part of what? She walked to the window, pointed toward Maple Street, visible in the distance. Look at the property records sometime. Every house on that street has changed hands exactly every 20 years, like clockwork, like something's waiting, building, preparing for the right moment. What moment? But Mrs. Hofstede was already leading me back upstairs. At the door, she gripped my arm. Your grandmother stayed longer than anyone. 40 years in that house after your grandfather died. She must have found a way to coexist. But you're young. You have a choice. What choice? Leave, tonight. Don't pack. Don't look back. Just go. I thought about the termites spelling out my name. About Grandma's journal. About the holes I'd already seen starting to form in my apartment walls back in Chicago. I don't think I have a choice anymore. Mrs. Hofstede's face went pale. She stepped back, and I saw it, a tiny golden shape crawling along her collar. No, she whispered. I suppose none of us do. On day 3, I made a decision. If I was going crazy, I needed proof. I set up my phone in the basement recording. Then I waited. But first, I had to eat. The abandoned cinnamon rolls mocked me from the counter. I threw them away and made a sandwich instead. Turkey, mayo, normal things. That's when I noticed the ant. Just one, carrying a crumb across the counter. But it wasn't moving toward the window or a crack in the wall, it was moving toward a specific spot. I followed its path with my eyes. There, near the toaster, a hole no bigger than a pinhead. I got down on my hands and knees, peered closer. The hole went deep, deeper than it should, and at the end of that tiny tunnel, a glimmer of gold. No, I said out loud. Not here too. This is the kitchen. This is where she made cookies. But they didn't care about our human boundaries, our sentimental attachments. They were everywhere, had always been everywhere. I thought about my apartment in Chicago, the strange smell in the bedroom closet I'd attributed to the previous tenant, the soft sounds I'd assumed were from the unit above. How long had they been watching, waiting, building? My phone buzzed. Text from Mom. Please come to Phoenix. Please. I almost laughed. Phoenix. Like distance mattered. Like they weren't already there too, constructing their miniatures in the adobe walls. Another text. They showed me something when I was 17. In the walls. I ran. I've been running ever since. But you can't run from what's inside you. Before I could respond, the phone died. Not low battery. Just dead. Black screen, nothing. Fine, I didn't need technology for this. I went to Grandma's study, Her desk was still covered with bills, letters, the detritus of a life. But I wasn't looking for paperwork. I was looking for, there, a letter opener. Sharp. Silver, it would do. Back to the kitchen. To that tiny hole. I should have left it alone. Should have listened to Mrs. Hofstede. Should have run. But I needed to know. Needed to see how far this went. The letter opener slid into the hole easily. I twisted, pried. Plaster crumbled. The hole widened and revealed another cathedral. Tiny. Perfect. But different from the ones in the basement. This one was modern. Glass and steel in miniature. Like those mega churches you see in the suburbs. And inside, movement. Not termites. Something else. Something that pulsed with bioluminescent light. I grabbed a magnifying glass from Grandma's desk. Looked closer. The things inside weren't insects at all. They were organic machines. Biomechanical constructs that moved with purpose and precision. Building. Always building. Creating structures that hurt to look at directly. Geometries that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. One of them noticed me watching. It paused in its work, turned what might have been a head in my direction, and waved, a perfectly human gesture from something the size of a rice grain. I jerked back. The magnifying glass shattered on the floor. 7 years bad luck. Like my luck could get worse. The thing was still waving, slow, deliberate, like it was trying to communicate. Against every instinct, I waved back. It stopped, turned to its companions. A flurry of movement, discussion, debate. Then they all turned toward me, dozens of them, all waving in perfect synchronization. "What do you want?" I whispered. They stopped waving, started building again, but faster now, frantic, pieces of their strange cathedral flying into place with impossible speed. And as they built, the structure began to take shape. Not a church anymore. A face, my face, built from their pearl-like material. Every detail perfect. Every line, every curve. A three-dimensional portrait that seemed to breathe despite being made of, what, secretions, extruded materials? I didn't want to know, no. The face opened its mouth, and from inside, more of them poured out. Hundreds, thousands, building more faces, all mine. A recursive nightmare of identity replicated in biomechanical horror. I stumbled backward, the kitchen spun, the floor tilted. When I woke up, it was dark outside. I was on the kitchen floor, the broken magnifying glass inches from my face, the hole in the wall, sealed, smooth, like it had never been there at all. But on the counter, arranged in perfect formation, were 7 of the golden termites from the basement, waiting, watching. One of them carried something in its mandibles, a piece of paper. Impossibly small, but I recognized it. A page from Grandma's journal, shrunk down to their scale. I got the tweezers from the bathroom, carefully picked up the miniature page, held it under the desk lamp with the magnifying glass that wasn't broken. The words were still readable, still in Grandma's handwriting. The convergence comes when the builder wakes, when all churches are complete, when the faithful have given themselves fully. Sarah, my dear one, you are the key. You have always been the key. Your DNA, your specific genetic structure. The little architects have been waiting for you since before you were born. This wasn't from the journal I'd found. This was new, written for me, written by them in Grandma's hand. The golden termites began to move, forming letters on the counter. She lives in us. All who feed the churches live in us, forever building, forever part of the great work. Grandma? My voice broke. Yes and no. We are many. We are one. We are becoming. Becoming what? But I already knew. had known since I'd seen that first impossible cathedral. They weren't building churches. They were building bodies. Vessels. Preparing for something that needed a very specific kind of architecture to manifest. The builder sleeps between spaces, between walls, between worlds. But when the last church is complete, when the last faithful joins the work, the builder wakes. And then, the termites scattered, reformed. One word, convergence. 10 p.m., nothing. 11 p.m., still nothing. Midnight, the walls came alive. But first, let me tell you what happened at 11:47. I was sitting in the basement, waiting, when I heard footsteps above me. Slow. Deliberate. Someone was in the house. My blood went cold. I'd locked everything. Checked twice. But those were definitely footsteps. "Hello?" I called out. The footsteps stopped. Then, humming. A woman's voice. Familiar melody. One of Grandma's favorite hymns. I crept up the stairs. The humming got louder. It was coming from the living room. I peered around the corner. The rocking chair was moving. Grandma's chair. Back and forth, back and forth. But no one was sitting in it. The humming continued, all around me now. Inside the walls, under the floor, above the ceiling. 1,000 voices joining in harmony. That's when I saw the photographs. Every picture in the room. Family photos spanning decades. The faces were gone. Not torn out, not faded, just smooth, blank, like they'd never existed. Except for one. My 7th birthday. Grandma and me in the garden. But now, our faces were made of that pearl-like material. 3-dimensional. Protruding from the flat photograph. And our eyes were moving. Tracking me as I stood frozen in the doorway. The humming stopped. "Sarah!" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Not quite Grandma's. Not quite human. "We've been waiting." "Grandma? I'm part of something bigger now, sweetheart. Something beautiful, something eternal. The little architects, they don't destroy, they preserve, they transform, they prepare." The rocking chair stopped moving. "Prepare for what?" "Come to the basement, let us show you." My feet moved without my permission, like I was being pulled by invisible strings, down the stairs into the darkness. But this time, the basement was different. The walls were gone, all of them, replaced by a vast cathedral that couldn't possibly fit in the space, pillars that rose into shadows, arches that defied physics, and everywhere, the termites, millions of them, building, singing, praying. In the center, an altar, and on that altar, "No," I whispered. It was Grandma, but not dead. Not alive either. She was integrated, part of the structure. Her body woven into the pearl-like material. Her hair spreading across the ceiling like silver veins. Her eyes, still human, still aware. "Don't be afraid," she said, and her voice came from the walls themselves. "This is the honor they give us, to become part of the great work, to build the bridge between worlds." Bridge for what? That's when I saw it. In the spaces between the termites, in the gaps in their impossible architecture. Something vast, something that existed in dimensions our minds weren't meant to perceive. The builder. It pressed against the barriers of reality like a cosmic hand against glass. Patient, eternal, waiting for the final piece to fall into place. "You!" Grandma's voice was full of love and terror. "You're the last bloodline, the last key. When you join the work, when your genetics complete the pattern, the door opens. The builder comes through. And this world becomes the foundation for something infinitely greater. I won't. You will. We all do, eventually. The little architects are patient. They're already inside you, Sarah. Have been since you were born, swimming in your blood, waiting in your bones. Every human on Earth carries them, but only certain bloodlines can complete the work. Only certain genetic patterns can hold the door open. I felt them then, moving under my skin. Had they always been there? Or was I only now aware? Why churches? I asked. Why religious architecture? Because faith creates spaces between certainty and doubt, between the physical and the spiritual. Churches are doorways by design. The little architects just perfected the concept. Story number 2. The carton stared back at me from the refrigerator shelf. February 14th, 2025. Valentine's Day. I checked my phone. Today was January 28th. 2 weeks seemed about right for milk expiration, except this was the third time this month. The first carton had expired on January 1st. New Year's Day. The second on January 20th. Inauguration Day. Now this. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe the Kroger down on Maple Street just stocks their milk weird. But something cold settled in my stomach as I reached for the carton. Something that had nothing to do with the 40-degree chill of the refrigerator. Before you think I'm crazy, before you click away to find something else to fall asleep to, let me tell you what happened next, because I need someone to know. I need someone to check their milk. Right now. Go ahead, I'll wait. Okay, what date does yours say? Is it just a random Tuesday, or is it something else? Something that matters. The story I'm about to tell you. It starts now. My name is Sarah Chen, and I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment in Milwaukee. Nothing special about it. Beige walls, carpet that's seen better days, and a kitchen so small you can touch both walls if you stretch your arms out. The kind of place you rent when you're 28 and still figuring things out. I noticed the milk thing by accident. See, I'm one of those people who checks expiration dates religiously. My mom drilled it into me growing up. Sarah, always check the dates. Food poisoning is no joke. So I do. Every time. That morning in early January, I was making coffee. My usual routine before heading to my job at the insurance company downtown. Grabbed the milk, glanced at the date out of habit. January 1st, 2025. I remember thinking, that's neat. Expires on New Year's Day. The milk was fine, smelled normal, tasted normal in my coffee. But I finished it that morning anyway. No point in keeping milk past its date, right? The next week, I bought another carton. Same brand. Prairie Farms, the one with the red barn on the label. Check the date. January 20th, 2025. Inauguration Day. I actually laughed about it. Told my coworker Melissa during lunch. That's so weird, she'd said, stirring her yogurt. Mine just expires on, random Thursdays. But when the third carton said February 14th, when the fourth said February 17th, President's Day, when the fifth said March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, the laugh died in my throat. I started taking pictures, started a note on my phone. Every carton of milk I bought from that Kroger, they all expired on holidays. Or significant dates, never a random Wednesday, never just the 23rd of whatever month. You're probably thinking what I thought at first. The dairy company does it on purpose. Some kind of marketing thing, right? Makes it easier to remember when your milk goes bad. I even called Prairie Farms, spent 20 minutes on hold just to ask. No, ma'am, the customer service rep had said, sounding tired. Our products expire based on production date plus shelf life. Usually 14 to 21 days. We don't coordinate with holidays. But they did. At least, the ones at my store did. I tried buying different brands. Land O'Lakes, July 4th. Kemp's, December 25th, store brand. April 15th, tax day. I stopped sleeping well sometime in the second week of February. Not because I was scared, not yet, but because I couldn't stop thinking about it. What are the odds? I did the math, or tried to. There are maybe 20 major holidays and significant dates in a year? The chance of randomly hitting them every single time. It was impossible, statistically impossible. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I started shopping at a different store. Target on Capitol Drive was only 5 minutes further than my usual Kroger. Bigger, brighter. One of those super Targets with the Starbucks inside and everything. I walked to the dairy section feeling hopeful. Relieved, even. This would prove it was just that one weird Kroger, right? Some strange coincidence with their shipment dates or... I picked up a carton of milk. Organic Valley this time. Might as well treat myself. Flipped it over to check the date. April 19th, 2025. My hands went cold. April the 19th, the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. I knew that date. We'd studied it in my American history class in college. Professor Martinez had made us memorize significant dates of domestic terrorism. No, this was reaching. April 19th could be anything. Could be random. I was seeing patterns where there weren't any. That's what humans do, right? We're pattern-seeking animals. We see faces in clouds, and I bought the milk anyway, and started keeping a spreadsheet. By March, I had data from 6 different stores across Milwaukee. Kroger, Target, 2 different Walmarts, Whole Foods, even the little corner bodega near my apartment. 23 cartons of milk purchased, every single one expired on a significant date. March 15th. Ides of March, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. June 19th, Juneteenth, September 11th, well, you know. October 31st, Halloween. November 11th, Veterans Day. I showed the spreadsheet to Melissa. She looked at it for a long time, scrolling through the dates on my phone while we sat in the break room. This is, she started, then stopped. Looked at me over her glasses. Sarah, are you okay? Like, really okay? I'm not making this up, I said, too quickly, too defensively. I'm not saying you are, but maybe you're just remembering the significant dates and forgetting the normal ones. Confirmation bias. I wanted to argue. Wanted to show her the pictures, the receipts, everything. But I saw the look in her eyes. That careful, concerned look people get when they think you might be losing it. So I laughed it off. Said she was probably right. Changed the subject to the Peterson account. But that night, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went back to the first Kroger, the one on Maple Street. It was past 10, the store nearly empty except for a few night shift workers restocking shelves. I walked to the dairy section, stood there staring at the milk. An employee walked by, young guy, maybe 19, with gauges in his ears and tired eyes. Name tag said Derek. "Help you find something?" he asked. The question tumbled out before I could stop it. "Do you ever notice anything weird about the milk dates?" He stopped, turned to look at me fully. For a second, I thought he was going to radio for security or something. Then he glanced around, checking if anyone was listening. "You mean how there are always holidays and stuff?" My heart hammered. "You've noticed?" He shrugged, already turning away. "Yeah? Weird coincidence, right? Anyway, milk's fresh. Came in this morning." "Wait," I called after him, but he was already disappearing into the back room. That's when I started the experiment. The real experiment. See? Buying milk and checking dates, that's passive. That's just observation. But what if I could influence it somehow? I know how that sounds, I know. But hear me out. March 20th, I went to Kroger at exactly 6 a.m. when they opened. Watched Derek. I'd learned his schedule by then. wheel out the fresh milk delivery. Waited until he'd stocked the shelves and left. Then I grabbed a carton from the very back, the very bottom, the last one he'd put out. April 22nd, 2025. Earth Day. I put it back. Grabbed one from the front, the top shelf. April 22nd, 2025. I checked 5 more cartons, all from different spots on the shelf, all April 22nd. Then I did something I'm not proud of. I waited until Derek took his break, saw him heading out to the parking lot probably to smoke. Followed him. I had to know. "Hey," I called out. He turned, recognized me, and his face changed, went carefully blank. "The milk lady," he said, not a question. "I need to know what's going on," I said. "Please. I'm not crazy. Lady, I just stock shelves. But you've noticed. You said you noticed." He took a long drag from his cigarette, looked at me. Really looked at me like he was making a decision. "You ever notice," he said finally, "how some things are just better left alone?" "What does that mean?" But he was already walking back inside. At the door, he paused, didn't turn around. "Check the code on the bottom of the cartons," he said. "Under the barcode, the little printed numbers. Then stop shopping here." He went inside. I never saw him at that Kroger again. I drove home with my hands shaking. Not from fear, not yet, but from something else. Anticipation, maybe. Or the feeling you get when you're about to pull a thread that might unravel everything. The milk carton sat on my kitchen counter. Just a normal carton, Red Barn, Happy Cows, wholesome Midwest dairy goodness. I flipped it over. Under the barcode, barely visible, was a string of numbers. 0403199521 and 41. I stared at it. Random numbers. Production code, probably. Batch number. Something normal and boring and... Wait, 040319952141. April 3rd, 1995. 21:41, military time. 9:41 p.m. I googled the date with shaking fingers. April 3rd, 1995. What happened on? My phone screen filled with results. April 3rd, 1995. The date Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols were arrested for the Oklahoma City bombing. Arrested at 9:41 p.m. The milk carton slipped from my numb fingers, hit the floor, didn't break. Those cartons are sturdy, but milk seeped out from the spout, spreading across my linoleum in a white puddle. I spent the next 3 days going to every store in Milwaukee, buying milk, checking codes, building a new spreadsheet, this time with 3 columns: store, expiration date, bottom code. Every code was a date and time. Every date and time was something horrible. December 14th, 2012, 9:30 a.m., Sandy Hook. September 11th, 2001, 8:46 a.m. First plane hits April 20th, 1999, 11:19 a.m. Columbine begins August 6th, 1945, 8:15 a.m. Hiroshima tragedies. Disasters. Moments when the world cracked a little. All printed in tiny numbers under cheerful pictures of barns and cows, I stopped sleeping, stopped eating much of anything, called in sick to work 3 days in a row. On the 4th day, Melissa showed up at my apartment. "Jesus, Sarah," she said when I opened the door. I know how I look." She pushed past me, took in my apartment. The empty milk cartons lined up on my counter. The spreadsheets taped to my wall. The laptop with 20 browser tabs open. All Wikipedia pages about disasters. "Okay," she said in that careful voice again. "Okay, let's sit down. Talk about this." I showed her everything. The codes, the dates, the patterns within patterns. She listened, actually listened. her face growing paler with each revelation. "This is—" She stopped, picked up one of the cartons, checked the code herself, typed it into her phone. Her hand covered her mouth when the results came up. "This is real," she whispered. "I know. But why? Why would anyone? I don't know." We sat in silence for a long time. Then Melissa asked the question I'd been avoiding. "What about the expiration dates? If the codes are all past events, tragedies that already happened, then what about the dates the milk expires? Those are all future dates, holidays, and significant dates that haven't happened yet." I looked at my wall of spreadsheets, at all those future dates. Valentine's Day, President's Day, St. Patrick's Day, Earth Day, the 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Christmas. "What if—" I started, then stopped. The thought was too big, too terrible. "What if they're not expiration dates?" Melissa finished. "What if they're warnings?" We made a decision that night. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe it was exactly what we weren't supposed to do. But we had to know. February 14th was 2 days away. Valentine's Day. I had 3 cartons in my fridge that expired that day, all with different tragedy codes on the bottom. If something was going to happen, if these dates meant what we thought they might mean, "We'll watch the news," Melissa said. "All day. If something happens, something big, then we'll know. And if nothing happens, then we're just 2 crazy people with too much milk." I wanted to laugh. Couldn't quite manage it. "And if something does happen?" I asked. She looked at me for a long time. "Then we figure out what to do about March 17th. February 14th came like any other day. Gray Milwaukee morning, light snow falling. Melissa stayed over the night before. We were both too wired to sleep, so we made coffee, with regular milk from her apartment, and waited. 6 a.m. Nothing 7 a.m., nothing 8 a.m. Local news talking about Valentine's Day flower prices. "Maybe we're wrong," Melissa said around 9. "Maybe." The breaking news alert cut her off. CNN, MSNBC, Fox. All of them switching to the same story at the same time. I won't tell you what happened. Can't. Not if I want this to stay on YouTube. But you remember. February 14th, 2025. Valentine's Day. You remember where you were when you heard, what you were doing, how your stomach dropped. Melissa grabbed my hand. We watched in silence as the death toll climbed, as the cameras showed what they could show, as the reporters tried to make sense of senseless things. "The milk knew," she whispered. "Oh God, Sarah, the milk knew." We tried to warn people about March 17th, called the FBI tip line, called local police, tried to explain about the milk and the dates and the codes. You can imagine how that went. "Ma'am," the FBI agent said patiently, like talking to a child. "Are you saying that dairy products are predicting terrorist attacks?" When I said it out loud, when I heard how it sounded. But Melissa and I knew. We'd seen February 14th come true. So when March 17th approached, we did the only thing we could think of. We left. Took a week off work, drove to her parents' cabin in northern Michigan, sat by the lake, and waited for the news to tell us we were crazy. We weren't crazy. March 17th, 2025. St. Patrick's Day. You remember that one too. Here's the thing about knowledge. Sometimes it's not power. Sometimes it's just weight. Melissa and I, we knew things were going to happen. We had a refrigerator full of expiration dates that weren't expiration dates. A calendar of coming tragedies spelled out in dairy products. But what could we do? Who would believe us? And even if they did, the milk wasn't specific. Didn't say where, didn't say what, just when. April came. April 15th, tax day. We tried again. called in anonymous tips to every agency we could think of, sent emails from burner accounts, even started a blog, the Milk Dates blog. That got exactly 17 views before being taken down for spreading misinformation. April 15th happened anyway. You know what happened. Everyone knows. By May, Melissa had stopped coming over, stopped returning my calls. I understood. How do you live knowing what we knew? How do you go to work, pay bills, plan for a future when you have a refrigerator full of prophecies? I kept buying milk, kept documenting. The codes on the bottom got worse, more recent. Tragedies from 2023, 2024. Getting closer to now, and the expiration dates. They started clustering. Multiple cartons expiring on the same day. Big days, days that felt heavy with possibility. July 4th, 2025. 17 cartons. October 31st, 2025. 23 cartons. December 25th, 25. 41 cartons. I mapped it out, drew charts, tried to find patterns within patterns. If I could just figure out the system, the logic, maybe I could. Derek found me in June. The Kroger employee, the one who'd warned me, knocked on my apartment door at 2 a.m. I'd never told him where I lived. "You didn't stop," he said when I opened the door. He looked older, tired in a way that went past physical exhaustion. How could I stop? He came in, looked at my walls, now completely covered in calendars, codes, newspaper clippings from the events that had already happened. His face didn't change. "They're going to reset it soon," he said. "Who? Who's they?" He shook his head. "I don't know. Nobody knows. I just know the pattern. Every few years, when too many people start noticing, they reset. New codes, new system. The milk goes back to normal for a while. But people are dying. People die anyway," he said, but his voice cracked. "The milk doesn't cause it. It just knows. And now you know. And knowing is a curse," I finished. He nodded, went to my fridge, opened it. Looked at all the cartons lined up like soldiers. "December 25th, he said quietly. "That's the big one. That's the one that ends this cycle. What happens on December 25th? He closed the fridge, turned to me. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Real, deep fear. I don't know. Nobody who's gotten this far has ever been around to find out. They either stop looking, move away, or... He didn't answer, didn't need to. Before he left, he pulled out a carton of milk from his jacket. Set it on my counter. "Bought this today," he said. "Different store, different city. Check the date." I looked. January 1st, 2026. New Year's Day. "The cycle continues," he said. "Always does. Even after the reset. Even after December 25th. The milk always knows." He left. I stood there holding the carton, feeling the cold seep into my hands. It's July now. July 3rd, to be exact. Tomorrow is the 4th of July. Independence Day. I have 17 cartons that expire tomorrow. 17. I've stopped trying to warn people, stopped trying to make sense of it, but I can't stop checking, can't stop knowing. Every trip to the store, every glance at a date, it's all connected, all counting down to something. Sometimes I think about that first carton. January 1st, 2025, New Year's Day. Such an innocent thing to notice. Oh, how neat, I'd thought. Expires on a holiday. I need you to do something for me, whoever's listening to this, whoever's made it this far. Go to your fridge right now, check your milk, check the expiration date, then, and this is important, check the code on the bottom, the little numbers under the barcode. What do they say? What date is hidden there? What moment of tragedy is printed beneath the happy cows and red barns? Or maybe yours is normal. Maybe it's just random numbers. A production code, nothing special. God, I hope that's what it is. I hope I'm crazy. I hope this is all some elaborate delusion and you're falling asleep to the ramblings of someone who saw patterns where there weren't any. But if your milk expires on a holiday, if the code underneath is a date and time, if that date and time brings up something horrible when you search for it, then you have a choice to make. You can stop looking, pour the milk down the drain, shop somewhere else, pretend you never noticed. Or you can do what I did. Keep looking, keep checking, keep watching the dates count down to something. December 25th. The big one. The reset. Part of me wants to know what happens. Part of me wants to run, hide, be anywhere but here when Christmas comes. But the milk in my fridge expires on December 25th, 2025. Every carton I've bought for the past week, they all say December 25th. And the codes are all the same. All showing the same date and time. 12/25/2025 0000 December 25th, 2025, midnight. Not a past tragedy, a future one. The first future code I've found. I don't know what happens at midnight on Christmas. I don't know if I'll be here to find out, but I know this. The milk knows, it's always known. And now you know too. Sweet dreams. Check your milk, and whatever you do, whatever you decide, remember that sometimes the expiration date isn't about the milk at all. Sometimes it's about us. Wait, before you go, before you close this video and try to sleep, there's something else. Something I didn't want to tell you because it makes it real. Makes me sound crazier than I already do. The milk isn't just in stores. Last week I ordered groceries online, Instacart. Thought maybe if I didn't physically choose the milk, if someone else picked it for me, maybe it would be different. Random. Normal. The shopper sent me a photo before checkout. Standard practice. Is this the right item? 3 cartons of Prairie Farms 2% milk in her cart. I zoomed in on the photo. Could just make out the dates. December 25th, 2025. December 25th, 2025. December 25th, 2025. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is what happened when I called my sister in Phoenix. Haven't talked to Claire in months. We had a falling out last Christmas about something stupid I can't even remember now. But I needed to know if this was just Milwaukee, just the Midwest, just me. Claire, I said when she answered, surprised. I know this is weird, but can you check your milk? Sarah, is everything okay? Please, just humor me. Check the expiration date on your milk. I heard her moving through her house, the fridge opening. A pause. November 28th, she said. Thanksgiving. Huh, that's actually kind of convenient. My heart sank. Claire, what brand? Some local Arizona dairy? Desert Farms or something. Why are you asking about... Check the code on the bottom, under the barcode, the tiny numbers. Sarah, you're scaring me. Please. Another pause. I could hear her breathing, then typing. Oh my God, she whispered. Sarah, this date. November 22nd, 1963, 12:30 p.m. That's JFK, I finished. I know. We stayed on the phone for 3 hours. She drove to 4 different stores across Phoenix. Every carton, every brand, all significant dates, all tragedy codes. It's not just milk anymore either. I've started checking other dairy products. Coffee creamer expires on Labor Day. Codes showing the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. Yogurt, Martin Luther King Day. Code, April 4th, 1968, 6:01 p.m. Even cheese. Blocks of cheddar with dates stretching into 2026, 2027. Future holidays. Future significances. Future events. Melissa finally called me back yesterday. She's been staying with her parents, trying to pretend everything's normal, but she can't stop checking either. "I found something," she said. Her voice sounded hollow, far away. "My dad, he works at the Historical Society. I asked him about patterns, about coincidences, about whether anyone had ever noticed weird things about dates before. And he showed me this journal from 1952, a housewife in Des Moines. She'd noticed her milk was expiring on significant dates, started documenting it. The journal goes on for months, detailed records just like yours. Then it just stops. December 24th, 1952. The last entry says tomorrow's milk all expires on Christmas. 47 bottles at the A&P. I'm scared." "What happened to her?" Dad didn't know, but he said there were others. Every few decades, someone notices, someone documents, someone disappears right before Christmas. Derek was wrong about one thing. It's not a reset. It's a countdown. I've been digging deeper, old newspapers, archives, looking for patterns before the internet made everything connected. Found mentions here and there. A grocer's ledger from 1923 noting unusual expiration alignment. A complaint letter to Borden Dairy from 1967 about morbid date printing. A Reddit post from 2019, deleted now, but cached on the Wayback Machine, asking if anyone else noticed their milk expired on 9/11. They all stop investigating around Christmas. Every single one. There's a photo on my phone from last January. Me and Melissa at her birthday party. We're laughing, holding up our drinks in a toast. Behind us, barely visible, the refrigerator. Door slightly open. You can just see the milk carton inside. I zoomed in yesterday. Enhanced it until the pixels went fuzzy. Could just make out the date. December 25th, 2025. That photo was taken January 3rd. The milk I bought on January 1st, the very first one I noticed, it already knew, already had December 25th printed on it. I just wasn't looking at the right carton. They all lead to Christmas. Every path, every carton, every code pointing backward to tragedy, while the dates point forward to what? I've stopped going to work. Stopped answering calls from anyone except Melissa and Claire. Started mapping every tragedy code I've found. Put pins on a world map. Drew lines between them. Looking for intersections. Convergence points. Meaning in the chaos. The pattern that emerged. It's not random. The tragedies on the codes. They're getting bigger. More recent. More connected. Building to something. And the number of cartons expiring on December 25th, it's not just 41 anymore. Every store I check, every day that passes, more appear. Like the universe is funneling toward that date, like everything is milk now, and it all goes bad on Christmas. Yesterday, I did something desperate. Drove to Prairie Farms directly. The actual dairy. It's about an hour outside Milwaukee. Big industrial complex with silos and processing plants. Thought maybe I could find answers at the source. The receptionist looked at me strangely when I asked about expiration dates. But she called someone, a manager. Mr. Patterson. Gray suit, tired eyes, a look of someone who'd answered too many strange questions. "We print dates based on production plus shelf life," he said. The same script the phone rep had given. 14 to 21 days. Standard across the industry. "But they're all holidays," I said. "Every single one." He shifted, glanced at the security camera in the corner of the lobby. "Ma'am, I assure you, December 25th, I interrupted. "You're printing December 25th on everything now. Why?" His face changed. Just for a second. Fear flickered across it before the professional mask slammed back down. "I think you should leave," he said quietly. "And I think I think you should stop looking at dates. For your own good. Security escorted me out, but as I was getting in my car, a woman ran up. Young, maybe 22, hairnet still on from the production floor. "I heard what you were asking about," she said, breathless. "The Christmas milk, we all know about it. They make us print those dates, special batch, special coding. Been doing it all year. Who tells you to?" She glanced back at the building. "Orders come from corporate, but corporate gets them from somewhere else. The drivers say every dairy in the country got the same orders. Maybe the world. December 25th, midnight. Something about alignment. Alignment of what?" But she was already running back, already scared she'd said too much. I know how this sounds. I know you're listening to this thinking I've lost it. Thinking this is just another creepypasta, another spooky story to fall asleep to. But here's the thing. I'm recording this on July 3rd, 2025. By the time you hear this, July 4th will have happened. Independence Day. 17 cartons worth of tragedy. And you'll remember. You'll remember where you were, what happened, how the news broke, and maybe you'll go check your milk. Or maybe you won't. Maybe you'll stay safe in not knowing. Close your eyes. Pretend expiration dates are just about freshness. That milk is just milk. That December 25th is just another Christmas. But if you're like me, if you can't stop looking once you start, then you need to know the last thing. The thing I haven't told anyone. Not even Melissa. I bought powdered milk last week. The kind that doesn't expire for years. Thought I was being clever. Thought I could opt out of the system. The can had a date stamped on the bottom, not an expiration date. A Best By date. December 25th, 2025. And underneath, in tiny print, a code I didn't need to look up. A date burned into everyone's memory. 12/25, 0000, so December 25th, year 0. Midnight, the first Christmas, the beginning of the calendar, or maybe the end. Comment below what date your milk expires on. I need to know if it's spreading, if others are starting to see what I see. And if your milk expires on December 25th, we'll all find out together what happens when the milk finally goes bad. Sweet dreams, if you can manage them. And whatever you do, whatever you decide, check your milk. Before it's too late to matter. Story number 3. The first time I noticed something was wrong. I was looking for my Social Security card in Mom's filing cabinet. That's when I saw it. The Christmas photo from 2019, sitting right there in the manila folder marked Important Documents. Mom and Dad were supposed to be standing behind me and my sister Katie, but they weren't there. Just 2 faint outlines, like someone had taken an eraser to them. My hands started shaking so bad I dropped the whole folder. Papers scattered everywhere. Birth certificates, tax returns, and more photos, all of them wrong. All of them missing pieces. If you're listening to this right now, lying in bed, thinking this is just another creepy story, I need you to do something for me. Go check your old photos right now, before it's too late. Because once it starts, once they begin to fade, there's no stopping it. And whatever you do, don't let them catch you looking. The story begins now. I should probably start by saying my name is Marcus Chen, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I understood how reality worked. I'm 26, work as a graphic designer in downtown Seattle, and I've always been the rational one in my family. Katie calls me boring. Called. I don't know what tense to use anymore. It was a Tuesday evening when everything changed. October 15th, I remember because I'd just gotten home from a particularly brutal day at work, and all I wanted was to crash on my couch and binge some mindless TV. But my landlord had left a notice about updating emergency contact information, and I needed my social security card to verify some details. That's what led me to my parents' house in Bellevue. They were at their weekly bowling league, so I used my spare key. The house smelled like Mom's lavender candles, mixed with the faint aroma of Dad's morning coffee that always lingered until evening. Everything normal, everything exactly as it should be. Their filing cabinet sat in the corner of Dad's home office, that ancient metal beast he'd bought at a garage sale in '95. Second drawer down, folder marked Marcus Important. I'd been through it 100 times over the years. College applications, medical records, the usual paper trail of a life lived. But when I pulled out that Christmas photo, everything I thought I knew crumbled. We'd taken it at Green Lake Park. I remembered that day perfectly. Katie had complained about the cold the entire time. Mom kept fussing with my hair, and Dad made his usual terrible jokes to try and get genuine smiles out of us. The photographer had been this older woman who smelled like peppermint and kept calling us such a beautiful family. Except now, in this photo, we weren't a family at all. Katie and I stood there in our matching red scarves. But behind us, where Mom and Dad should have been, there were only these weird, translucent outlines, like watermarks on paper. You could see the trees through them, see the lake, see everything that should have been blocked by their bodies. My first thought was that something had damaged the photo, maybe moisture or heat or, I don't know, some kind of chemical reaction. But the rest of the image was perfect, crystal clear. Every detail of Katie's annoyed expression, every fold in my scarf, everything except our parents. I grabbed another photo, Katie's high school graduation. Same thing, there we were, Katie in her cap and gown, me looking bored in my suit, and two ghostly shapes where Mom and Dad should have been standing. Another photo, our trip to Mount Rainier, another, Dad's 50th birthday party, another, 4th of July at Alki Beach. In every single one, my parents were fading away. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. It wasn't random. The older photos, they were normal. Mom and Dad clear as day. It was only the recent ones, starting maybe 5 years ago, where they began to fade. And the more recent the photo, the more transparent they became. In the newest ones, you could barely see them at all. I sat there on Dad's office floor, surrounded by scattered photos, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My rational brain kept searching for explanations. Maybe it was some kind of elaborate prank. Maybe I was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe. That's when I heard the garage door opening. My parents were home. I scrambled to gather the photos, shoving them back into folders, trying to make it look like I hadn't been rifling through their things. By the time they walked in, I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to scroll through my phone. "Marcus!" Mom's voice carried that special mix of surprise and joy that only mothers can manage. "What are you doing here, sweetie?" I looked up, and for just a second, just a fraction of a moment, I could have sworn I saw through her. "Just needed to grab some documents," I managed, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "For my landlord." Dad walked in behind her, loosening his bowling shirt collar. "You should join us sometime, son. Tom's kid just started coming. Makes me look good by comparison." They looked normal, solid, real. Mom's graying hair pulled back in her usual ponytail. Dad's slight beer belly straining against his lucky bowling shirt. Everything exactly as it should be. So why couldn't I shake the feeling that they were flickering? "You okay, honey?" Mom asked, her hand reaching out to touch my forehead. "You look pale." Her hand was warm, solid, real. I wasn't imagining things. I couldn't be. "Yeah, just tired. Long day at work." We chatted for a few more minutes. Normal parent-child stuff. How was work? Was I eating enough? When was I going to bring someone nice home for dinner? The usual routine. But I couldn't focus. My eyes kept drifting, looking for signs of transparency, for evidence that what I'd seen in those photos was bleeding into reality. I left as quickly as I could without raising suspicion, but I took one of the photos with me, tucked into my jacket pocket, the one from Katie's graduation, where you could see the podium through Dad's chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept pulling out the photo, staring at it under my desk lamp, trying to convince myself I was seeing things. But the evidence was right there. Undeniable. Impossible. But undeniable. I thought about calling Katie. She lived in Portland now, working as a nurse at OHSU. But what would I say? "Hey, sis, Mom and Dad are disappearing from our photos. Thought you should know?" She'd think I'd lost it. Hell, I was starting to think I'd lost it. Instead, I did what any millennial does when faced with the incomprehensible. I went down an internet rabbit hole, searched for everything I could find about photos changing, people disappearing from images, reality glitches. Most of it was obvious nonsense, creepypastas and conspiracy theories. But buried deep in an obscure forum, I found something that made my hands shake all over again. A post from 3 years ago. Username Lost in Frames. They described the exact same thing. Family members fading from photos, starting with the recent ones, working backwards. They'd documented everything, posted images, kept a detailed timeline. Their last post was simple. They're all gone now. The photos are empty, and I can't remember their faces. The account had been inactive ever since. I stayed up until dawn, reading every post, studying every image they'd shared. The progression was terrifying in its consistency. First, the fading in recent photos. Then, the older photos started changing too. Then, physical objects began to disappear. A coffee mug with "World's Best Dad" vanishing from kitchen counters. A mother's handwriting fading from birthday cards. And finally, the memories themselves began to blur. The last coherent post from Lost in Frames was a desperate plea. I know I had a family. I can feel the shape of them in my mind. But when I try to picture them, there's nothing there. Just empty spaces where love used to be. I closed my laptop as the first rays of sunlight hit my apartment window. My hands were trembling, and not from the 3 cups of coffee I'd downed. Because if this pattern held, if what happened to Lost in Frames was happening to my family, I had maybe 2 months before my parents vanished completely, and I had no idea how to stop it. The next few days passed in a blur of paranoia and investigation. I called in sick to work, claiming food poisoning, and devoted every waking hour to figuring out what was happening to my family. My apartment became a makeshift command center. Photos spread across every surface, laptop open to dozens of tabs about memory anomalies and reality distortions. I started a journal. Documentation felt important somehow. Like if I wrote everything down, it would stay real, stay true. The first entry was simple. October 19th. Parents still visible in person. Fading continues in photos. Katie hasn't noticed yet. I hadn't told my sister. How could I? Every time I picked up the phone to call her, I imagined her reaction, the concern in her voice, the suggestion that maybe I should talk to someone, the careful way she'd handle her unstable brother, the same way she handled difficult patients at the hospital. But I needed more evidence, needed to understand the pattern. So I did something that felt like a violation, but necessary. I broke into my parents' house again, this time in the middle of the day while they were both at work. Mom at the elementary school where she taught 3rd grade. Dad at his accounting firm downtown. I went straight for the photo albums. The old ones Mom kept in the hall closet, dating back to before Katie and I were born. Their wedding album, their college years, their childhoods. The earliest photos were still normal. Mom as a baby in her mother's arms, Dad at 5 years old with his first bike. But as I moved forward in time, I found the edge, the boundary where normal became wrong. It was a photo from '92. Their trip to Hawaii for their 5th anniversary. They stood on a beach at sunset, lay around their necks, glowing with young love and tropical sun. But if you looked closely, really closely, you could see the faintest outline of translucency around Dad's edges, like someone had turned down his opacity to 98% in Photoshop. 1992, 30-plus years ago. Whatever was happening, it had been happening for a long time. I took photos of everything with my phone, created a timeline. The fading was exponential, barely noticeable for decades, then accelerating rapidly in recent years. By my calculations, they'd be completely gone by Thanksgiving. That's when I heard the front door open. "Hello? Someone there?" Mom's voice. She wasn't supposed to be home. It was barely noon on a Wednesday. I froze, surrounded by scattered photo albums, looking like exactly what I was, a crazy person obsessing over family pictures. There was no time to clean up, no excuse that would make sense. She appeared in the hallway, and I saw it immediately. She was more translucent than before, not dramatically, but enough that I could see the wall color through her yellow cardigan. "Marcus? Honey? What are you doing?" Her voice carried concern but not alarm, like finding me sitting in her hallway surrounded by photos was just mildly unusual. My mouth went dry. I was looking for something. She tilted her head, that familiar gesture she'd done my whole life when she knew I wasn't telling the complete truth. Looking for what? And maybe it was the stress, or the sleep deprivation, or just the weight of carrying this impossible knowledge alone. But I broke. "Mom, something's wrong with the photos." She blinked, once, twice, then smiled that soft smile that had comforted me through skinned knees and broken hearts. "What do you mean, sweetie?" I held up the Hawaii photo. "Look at this. Look at Dad." She took it from me, studied it with the same expression she used when grading papers, focused, thoughtful. Then she handed it back. "Your father looks so young there. Hard to believe we were ever that thin." "You don't see it?" My voice cracked. The fading?" Her expression shifted, not to confusion or concern, but to something else, something I'd never seen on my mother's face before. Understanding. "Oh, Marcus," she said softly. "You can see it." The hallway seemed to tilt. You know," she sat down next to me on the floor, her movements careful and deliberate. When she spoke, her voice was gentle, the same tone she'd used when explaining why our goldfish went to live in the big aquarium in the sky. "Your father and I have known for a while now. Started noticing it about 5 years ago. The pictures changing. The transparency. And you didn't think to mention this?" My voice came out louder than intended. "That you're literally disappearing?" She reached out to touch my hand, and I fought the urge to pull away. Her skin still felt solid, still warm, still real. What would we say? "Hey kids, we're slowly ceasing to exist, but don't worry about it. We didn't want to burden you, didn't want your last months with us to be tainted by this. Last months?" The words came out as a whisper. She nodded. "We figure we have until late November, maybe early December if we're lucky. After that," she shrugged, the gesture heartbreakingly casual. "After that, we'll be gone. There has to be something we can do. Doctors, scientists, someone who can help. We've tried, quietly. Specialists who deal with unusual cases. They all say the same thing. Once the fading starts, it doesn't stop. Can't stop. It's like we're being edited out of existence, one pixel at a time. I stared at her. This woman who'd raised me, who'd been the constant in my life, and tried to reconcile her calm acceptance with the terror clawing at my chest. "How are you so okay with this?" She smiled, and for a moment, I could swear I saw the hallway wall through her teeth. "We've had a good life, Marcus. Raised 2 wonderful children, loved each other for 37 years. If this is how it ends, gently fading away, there are worse ways to go." "But you won't just be gone," I said, remembering Lost in Frames posts. "Everything about you will disappear. Objects, memories. It'll be like you never existed." Her composure cracked, just slightly, a tremor in her hand, a tightness around her eyes. "We know." We sat there in silence, surrounded by the evidence of their disappearing lives. Finally, she spoke again. "Don't tell Katie, not yet. Let her have a few more normal weeks. Please." I wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all, but looking at my mother, seeing the plea in her increasingly translucent eyes, I nodded. "Okay, but I'm not giving up. I'm going to find a way to stop this." She squeezed my hand. "I know you will, sweetie. You always were the stubborn one." That night, I went back to the forums, back to searching for answers. But now I had a deadline. 6 weeks, maybe 7. Before my parents vanished completely, I found more stories, hidden in the dark corners of the internet where impossible things gather. People who'd lost family members to the fade, as some called it. No pattern to who was affected. No commonality except the progression. Photos first, then physical presence, then objects, then memories. Always in that order. Always inevitable. One user, Memory Keeper 99, had documented their spouse's disappearance in excruciating detail. They'd tried everything: medical intervention, religious ceremonies, even attempting to tattoo their partner's name on their skin, only to watch the ink fade along with everything else. Their final post haunted me. I know I was married. I can feel the indent on my ring finger, but when I try to remember their face, their name, there's just fog. Whatever takes them doesn't just steal their presence. It steals their existence from the very fabric of reality. I closed my laptop and stared at the graduation photo still sitting on my desk. Mom and Dad were barely visible now, just the faintest suggestions of human shapes, like ghosts caught on film. 6 weeks to save them, 6 weeks to solve an impossible problem, and I had no idea where to start. The text from Katie came at 2 a.m. the following Tuesday. "Something's wrong with Mom and Dad, driving up now." I'd been expecting it, as the fading accelerated. It was only a matter of time before she noticed. What I hadn't expected was the attached photo, a selfie she'd taken with them last weekend when they'd visited Portland. In it, our parents were completely invisible, not translucent, not faded, gone. Only Katie seemed unaware, smiling at the camera with her arms around empty air. By the time she arrived at my apartment 6 hours later, I'd prepared everything. The photos laid out chronologically, the forum posts printed and highlighted, my journal with its meticulous documentation, evidence of the impossible arranged like a case file. She looked exhausted, hair pulled back in a messy bun, still wearing her hospital scrubs under her jacket. But her eyes were sharp, alert. The same look she got when diagnosing a difficult case. "Show me," was all she said. So I did. Walked her through everything. The discovery, the pattern, Mom's confession, the timeline we were working with. She absorbed it all in silence, occasionally picking up a photo to examine it more closely, sometimes typing notes into her phone. When I finished, she sat back and closed her eyes. I thought I was losing my mind. I kept seeing gaps, moments where they'd be talking to me and I'd lose focus, like my brain couldn't quite process them. And the dreams. She opened her eyes. Empty rooms that should have people in them. Conversations with no one. Hugging air and feeling loved. It's been happening for weeks. The memory erosion is starting, I said quietly. According to the forums, it begins before the physical disappearance completes. Our brains trying to reconcile what we see with what we remember. No, she stood abruptly, pacing my small living room. No, there has to be a medical explanation. A neurological condition affecting both of us. Mass psychosis. Something. Katie, don't. She spun to face me. Don't you dare accept this. We're talking about our parents. Marcus. The people who raised us, who loved us. They can't just fade away like a bad Instagram filter. I understood her anger. I'd felt it too. The rage at the universe for allowing something so fundamentally wrong to occur. But I'd had days to process it. She'd had minutes. I've been looking for solutions, I said. There's a woman in Massachusetts, claims she reversed her husband's fading for a few days, and a group in Japan studying what they call existence degradation. We could reach out, then why are we sitting here? She grabbed her jacket. Let's go. Katie, it's not that simple. The woman in Massachusetts disappeared herself 2 weeks after posting about the reversal. The Japanese group went dark 6 months ago. Everyone who gets too close to solving this, they fade too. She stared at me. You're saying if we try to save them, we'll disappear? I'm saying everyone who's claimed to find a cure has vanished within weeks of announcing it. Maybe they succeeded and faded as a consequence. Maybe they failed and something removed them. Either way, we're screwed. She sank back onto my couch. How long do we have? 5 weeks, maybe 6. We spent the rest of that day planning. Katie took leave from the hospital, claiming family emergency. We moved into our parents' house, ostensibly to help with some fictional home repairs. In reality, we wanted to spend every possible moment with them while we still could. The next 3 weeks were a strange kind of beautiful. We had family dinners every night, played board games, looked through old photos, the ones where they still appeared solid and real. Mom taught Katie her secret chocolate chip cookie recipe. Dad finally showed me how to change my own oil, his translucent hands guiding mine on the wrench. They knew we knew. We knew they knew we knew. But nobody spoke about it directly. We existed in this bubble of deliberate normalcy, pretending the elephant in the room wasn't slowly vanishing before our eyes. But I couldn't stop investigating. Late at night, while everyone slept, I dove deeper into the mystery. I found patterns the others had missed. Geographic clusters where fading occurred more frequently, times of year when it accelerated, and, most interesting, a correlation with certain astronomical events. Every documented case of fading began during a specific configuration of planets, what astronomers called a syzygy, when celestial bodies aligned. The exact configuration varied, but the timing was consistent, and according to my calculations, the next major syzygy would occur on November 27th, Thanksgiving Day, the same day I estimated my parents would complete their fade. It couldn't be coincidence. But what did it mean? Were they being pulled somewhere, shifted to another dimension, or simply deleted? I shared my findings with Katie. She'd abandoned her medical skepticism and embraced the impossible with the single-minded focus that made her such a good nurse. Together, we formed a theory. What if they're not disappearing? She said one night. Both of us hunched over my laptop. What if they're moving, transitioning to somewhere else. Like where? I don't know. Another plane of existence, a parallel dimension. Somewhere our physics can't measure, but somewhere nonetheless. It was a comforting thought, that our parents weren't ceasing to exist but simply relocating. But comfort didn't equal truth. November crept closer. Mom and Dad grew more translucent by the day. Photos on the walls began to empty, their figures vanishing from family portraits and candid shots alike. Objects they'd treasured started to fade. Dad's bowling trophies grew ghostly. Mom's teaching awards became transparent 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. I woke to find Katie in the kitchen, staring at an empty chair. "She was just here," she whispered. Mom was sitting right there, drinking her morning coffee. I could see her, could hear her humming. But when I blinked, she gestured helplessly at the vacant seat. The memory gaps were getting worse. Conversations we'd just had would slip away. I'd find myself standing in rooms with no recollection of why I'd entered them, feeling like I was searching for someone who should be there. 1 week before Thanksgiving, Dad became completely invisible to us. We could still hear him sometimes, his voice echoing from empty rooms. Feel the displacement of air when he walked past. But visually, he was gone. Mom lasted 3 more days. The last time I saw her, she was standing in their bedroom, looking at their wedding photo. She was barely a shimmer in the air, like heat distortion rising from summer asphalt. "I'm scared," she admitted, the first time she'd shown any fear. "What if we forget you too? What if wherever we're going, we don't remember having children?" I hugged her, or tried to. My arms passed through nothing but cool air. "You won't forget us. Love doesn't fade, Mom, even if everything else does." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. My practical boy, suddenly believing in the power of love. "You taught me well." The shimmer that was my mother flickered. "Take care of each other. And Marcus, look in the attic, behind the Christmas decorations. We left something for you." Then she was gone. Katie and I raced to the attic. Behind boxes of ornaments and tangled lights, we found a metal container. Inside, hundreds of photos. But these weren't family pictures. They were images of empty rooms, vacant chairs, unoccupied spaces, and on the back of each, in handwriting that was already beginning to fade, notes. "This is where we had our first kiss. Katie took her first steps here. Marcus broke his arm falling from this tree. We were happy in this space, maps to memories, anchors to hold on to when even their faces faded from our minds." The final photo showed an empty field under a night sky. On the back, in Dad's careful script, November 27th, midnight. "If you want to understand, be here." I recognized the location, a field outside Snoqualmie where Dad used to take us stargazing, where he'd taught us the constellations and told us stories about traveling between the stars. 4 days until Thanksgiving, 4 days until the syzygy, 4 days to decide if we were brave enough to follow them into the fade. The night before Thanksgiving, Katie and I sat in our parents' empty house, surrounded by the ghosts of a life that was rapidly ceasing to exist. The family photos on the walls showed only us now, standing in front of empty backgrounds, our arms positioned as if embracing people who were no longer there, or perhaps had never been there at all. My memory was Swiss cheese. I knew I had parents. The evidence was everywhere: mortgage documents, a house full of furniture, 2 names on a mail. But when I tried to picture their faces, recall their voices, there was only static, like trying to tune into a radio station that had gone off the air. Katie was handling it worse. I'd found her that morning standing in front of the bathroom mirror, tears streaming down her face. "I can't remember her eyes," she'd whispered. "I know they were kind. I know they crinkled when she smiled. But the color, the shape, it's all gone." We'd decided to go to the field. Of course we had. What else was there to do? Sit in an empty house and wait for the last traces of our parents to evaporate? At least this way, we'd have answers, or we'd have nothing. But the not knowing was killing us faster than any fade could. I'd spent the day preparing, packed flashlights, though I wasn't sure why we'd need them. Brought the metal container with the photos, thinking maybe they were more than just memory anchors. Downloaded star charts to confirm the syzygy would occur precisely at midnight. Even charged my phone to 100%, as if Instagram stories could capture whatever was about to happen. Now, with 3 hours until midnight, we drove through the dark streets of Snoqualmie in silence. The radio played classic rock, songs I knew my father had loved, though I couldn't remember him singing along. Every so often, Katie would start to say something, then stop. What was there to say? We were driving toward either revelation or madness, and words felt inadequate for either. The field was exactly as I remembered it. A cleared patch of land surrounded by evergreens, far enough from the city that the stars burned bright and clear. We'd come here so many times as kids. I had vivid memories of lying on blankets, hot chocolate in thermoses, someone pointing out constellations, someone teaching us to find Polaris, someone making us feel small but loved under the infinite sky. Someone. But not who. We parked at the field's edge and got out. The November air bit through my jacket, sharp and clean. Above us, the stars arranged themselves in patterns I knew by heart but couldn't remember learning. "Look," Katie breathed. The field wasn't empty. As our eyes adjusted, we could see them. Dozens of faint outlines standing in the grass. Human-shaped distortions in the air, like heat mirages in the cold night. They stood perfectly still, all facing the same direction, all waiting. "Oh God," Katie grabbed my arm. "Are those?" Others who had faded. It had to be. People who had vanished from photos and memories. Gathered here for what? A departure? An arrival? We walked among them, these phantom figures. Some were alone. Others stood in pairs or small groups. Family units maybe, all translucent, all silent, all waiting for midnight and whatever the syzygy would bring. Near the center of the field, two figures stood slightly apart from the rest. The distortion they created was familiar, the way they leaned toward each other, the space between them that suggested decades of comfortable intimacy. "Mom?" Katie's voice broke. "Dad?" The figures didn't turn, didn't acknowledge us. But something in the air shifted. A warmth, despite the cold. A feeling of being seen even if we couldn't see in return. We stood with them. Where else would we be? Katie on one side, me on the other. Completing a family unit that existed more in negative space than reality, and we waited as the minutes ticked toward midnight. At 11:55, the air began to change. A electricity that raised the hair on my arms. The transparent figures around us grew more defined. Not solid, but clearer. Like someone was adjusting the focus on a cosmic lens. At 11:58, stars began to align. Planets slid into configuration with a precision that defied coincidence. The syzygy forming before our eyes. Celestial bodies arranging themselves into a pattern that occurred once every few decades. A doorway written in the movements of worlds. At 11:59, Katie gasped. I could see them. Not clearly, not completely, but for the first time in days. I could make out features in the translucent shapes beside us. A woman's face, lined with laugh lines and worry wrinkles earned through years of raising children. A man's profile, strong jaw softened by age and good humor. My parents, our parents, still there, still real, still impossibly present despite having faded from every photograph and memory. Marcus, Katie, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Mom's voice, but different, like it was being transmitted across impossible distances. You came. Of course we came, Katie sobbed. Where else would we be? You have a choice to make. Dad's voice joined Mom's, creating a harmony that resonated in my chest. In 60 seconds, a door opens. We're going through. You can follow, but if you do, you fade too. From photos, from memories, from this world entirely. Where does it go? I asked. Elsewhere, elsewhere. A place between spaces, outside time. Will exist, but not here. Never here again. Why? Katie demanded. Why is this happening? Why you, not just us? Mom's voice carried infinite sadness. All of us. Everyone here. We're the glitches, Katie. The ones who somehow got unstuck from reality, who started existing in two places at once. And the universe, it doesn't like paradoxes, so it edits us out, slowly, gently, but thoroughly. Unless we go willingly, Dad added, through the door, to the place where paradoxes can exist, where we can be whole again, just not here. 30 seconds to midnight. Around us, the gathered figures grew more solid, more real. I could see faces now, all ages, all walks of life, all waiting for a door I couldn't yet see but could feel building in the fabric of space. If we don't go, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Then you stay. You live your lives. You remember what you can. And eventually, hopefully, the fade reverses. You become solid again, real again, but will be gone, truly gone. No more ghostly visits, no more distorted voices. The edit will be complete. 15 seconds. I can't, Katie whispered. I can't lose you. Not completely. You won't, Mom promised. We'll be elsewhere, not gone, just translated. And someday, when your time comes to fade, if it comes, you'll know where to find us. 10 seconds. The air split. A seam in reality opened before us, revealing not darkness, but a soft golden light. Through it, I glimpsed impossible things, cities built from memory, forests of forgotten dreams, a place where the lost things gathered, waiting to be found again. 5 seconds. The figures around us began moving toward the door, a procession of the faded, stepping through the seam between worlds. Our parents turned to look at us one last time, and for a heartbeat, they were solid, real, exactly as I remembered them before the memories were stolen. We love you, they said in unison. Always. 3 seconds. They stepped toward the door. 2 seconds. Katie's hand found mine, squeezed tight. 1 second. Midnight. The door blazed with light. The faded ones passed through in a stream of translucent figures, each becoming whole the moment they crossed the threshold. Our parents paused at the boundary, silhouettes against the golden glow, waiting, hoping, but not demanding. Katie and I stood at the edge of two worlds. Stay and live with the hole in our hearts, or follow and cease to exist in any way the world would recognize. The door would only remain open for moments. Whatever we decided, it had to be now. I thought about my job, my apartment, my friends who wouldn't remember me, the life I'd built that would unravel thread by thread until even my name disappeared from every document. Then I thought about family, about love that transcends dimensions, about the empty spaces in photos that would never be filled if we stayed. Katie looked at me, I looked at her, and in that moment, we both knew. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes it means holding on. And sometimes it means following the people who matter most into the impossible. We stepped forward. The door pulsed, reality held its breath. And just as our feet were about to cross the threshold, we stopped. Because in that instant, I remembered something. A conversation from years ago, sitting in this very field. Dad pointing at the stars, telling us about the hero's journey, how the hero always has to return home, how the story isn't complete until they bring back what they've learned to help others. "We can't," I said, and Katie nodded. She'd remembered too. Our parents smiled, not disappointed, proud. "Then this isn't goodbye," Mom said. "It's see you later. Take care of each other," Dad added. "And when others start to fade, help them understand. Be their guides, be their hope." They stepped through. The door blazed brighter, swallowing their forms in warm light. For a moment, I saw them on the other side, whole, young, surrounded by others who welcomed them with open arms. A family reunited in a place outside time. Then the door began to close. The seam in reality narrowed. The golden light fading. Around us, the field emptied as the last of the faded crossed over. Soon, it was just Katie and me, standing in an ordinary field under ordinary stars, holding an extraordinary secret. The door disappeared with a sound like a sigh. The syzygy passed. The planets continued their eternal dance, unaware or uncaring of the miracle they'd briefly enabled. We stood there for a long time, neither speaking, both processing what we'd witnessed, what we'd chosen. The cold eventually drove us back to the car, but we sat in the parking lot until dawn, watching the stars fade as the sun rose. "Did we make the right choice?" Katie finally asked. I thought about it, really thought about it. They're safe, they're whole, they're together. And we're here to help others when it happens to them. Yeah, I think we did. The drive home was surreal. The world looked exactly the same, but everything had changed. We knew now that reality wasn't as solid as it seemed, that people could slip between the cracks, that love could transcend dimensions even if bodies couldn't. Our parents' house was different when we returned, not empty anymore, but filled with purpose. We'd inherited more than property. We'd inherited a mission. I quit my job. Katie took extended leave. We turned the house into something new, a way station, a place for the fading to come and understand what was happening to them, where they could find comfort, guidance, hope. The first one showed up 2 weeks later. A teenager from Tacoma, convinced she was losing her mind as her grandmother disappeared from family photos. We showed her our collection, explained the process, held her while she cried, helped her say goodbye when the time came. Word spread in the way word spreads about impossible things, quietly, through whispers and careful forums, through people who'd seen too much to dismiss the extraordinary. They came from everywhere, the fading and their families, seeking answers. seeking peace, seeking someone who understood. We became the lighthouse keepers for those lost between worlds. Katie used her medical training to document the physical aspects of fading. I used my design skills to create guides, visual aids that helped people understand what their loved ones were experiencing. Together, we built a network of support that spanned the globe. 3 years have passed now. We've helped hundreds make the transition, watched countless doors open during syzygies, said goodbye to so many who chose to step through, and held so many who chose to stay. The photos on our walls are different now, not empty, but full of new faces. The fading ones we've helped, the families who've found comfort here, the community that's grown around this impossible truth. Our parents aren't in these pictures, but their love is in every person we've guided, in every hand we've held, in every goodbye that's really see you later. Sometimes, late at night, I still pull out that graduation photo, the one that started everything. Our parents are gone from it now, the image showing just Katie and me. But I don't see absence anymore. I see presence. The negative space where they stood is shaped like love, like sacrifice, like the choice to let go so we could hold on to something bigger. Katie's getting married next month, to another lighthouse keeper. Someone whose wife faded 2 years ago. Someone who understands that grief and hope can coexist, that absence doesn't mean gone, that love transcends dimensions even when people can't. We're planning to take photos at the wedding, lots of them. And in each one, we'll leave space, not empty space, but reserved space, for the family members who exist elsewhere, for the love that bridges worlds, for the invisible threads that connect us across impossible distances. Because here's what I've learned in 3 years of watching people fade. Nothing truly disappears. It just transforms, translates, transitions to somewhere our cameras can't capture, but our hearts still know. And sometimes, during certain configurations of planets, when the door opens and the golden light spills through, I swear I can see them, all of them, the faded ones, standing just beyond the threshold, whole and happy and waiting. Not gone, never gone, just elsewhere. Elsewhere, but still here in the space between heartbeats, in the pause between words, in the love that refuses to fade no matter how many photos empty or memories blur. My name is Marcus Chen. My parents' names have faded from my memory, but their love hasn't. Their faces have vanished from photos, but their impact remains. They exist elsewhere now, in a place I'll find someday when my own edges start to blur and the universe decides I'm a paradox that needs resolving. Until then, I'm here. Katie's here. We're the keepers of the threshold, the guides for the fading, the proof that love transcends dimension, that family extends beyond the physical, that goodbye is just another word for transformation. If you're listening to this lying in bed, maybe you've noticed something wrong with your photos too. Maybe someone you love is starting to fade. Maybe you're fading yourself. Know this, you're not alone, you're not crazy, and you're not disappearing. You're just transitioning. And when the door opens, when the choice comes, remember that both options are valid. Stay and help others. Go and become whole elsewhere. Either way, love remains. Love always remains. Even when the photos are empty, even when the memories blur, even when all that's left is the shape of absence and the weight of what was, love remains. Love always remains. And that, now, listen, the whispers, and make a decision whether we are going to cooperate with the whispers or we just want to skip them. But actually, no one can skip these whispers. If you walk away from them, they will run towards you until they reach you. They confront you, make you pay, make you suffer the same thing they suffer. There is no escape from them. If you want to escape, help them, so they can have peace, and you also can have it, help, or you will ask for help soon. So, the end of today's video has arrived. Share your personal horror experiences in the comments. Also, comment the part of the story that you find the most horror and terrifying. If you like this video, leave a like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Also, ring the bell icon so you don't miss the upcoming videos. Remember, don't run from whispers, because they follow you. They know you. They want you to listen, just confront them. Now, sleep well, or should I say, have a haunted night.